Benjamin B. Warfield was always one of my favorite theologians, even when I was an MDiv student. I knew very little about his life. I did know that his wife Annie was an invalid, and I did know about the grace and the kindness that he showed to her. The thing that drew me to Warfield most was his theological abilities, his intellect. Warfield had a wit and a wisdom about him such that he was able to pierce the heart at one moment and take the theological nonsense of the day to task at the next. Warfield is just a wonderful figure. He's a model for any theologian. One of the things about this book that I think is significant is that Warfield actually speaks into our own day. He speaks to biblical scholars and theologians who have gone off the beaten path with regard to revelation and inspiration, and he addresses them in a way that speaks right into the controversies of the day. The book that I write about him is really in two parts. The first part of the book focuses on Warfield's own theological development with regard to the doctrine of Scripture, inspiration in particular. Warfield could best be described from 1880 to 1915 as a man whose theological position is under construction. Now, I want to be careful with that, because when I say that, I have something in particular in mind, and by that I mean that Warfield, from the very beginning in 1880, when he gave his inaugural address, said, I don't sign these standards. I don't sign my name to the confession as a mere form, as some were doing during his day. But he said, I sign them gladly and willingly because they're an expression of my own personal cherished conviction. So when I say that Warfield's theological position with regard to the doctrine of inspiration was under construction, I mean that he stood firmly on confessional ground. But as he stood firmly on confessional ground, there was room to move, and he did. And we see a lot of that movement occur in the midst of controversy, a controversy that he was invited into by Archibald Alexander Hodge, who had recently started a journal with Charles Briggs at Union Seminary. It wasn't long before the two of them were at odds with one another and decided to start a discussion / debate in their newly founded journal. Hodge had invited Warfield in to write the apologetic part of the article. Warfield enters into controversy very early, and it's in the midst of that controversy and beyond that he develops his doctrine of inspiration. That's the first part of the book. The latter part of the book is about his theological contribution. In that article I was referring to, written by both Hodge and Warfield, one of the things that's interesting about that book is they talk about how inspiration as a word is used in the theological debate of the day. They argue that it's used in somewhat of an irresponsible and even embarrassing manner. There's no definition, so it's a word that's used loosely in their day and age. And so one of the things that Warfield and Hodge did was to bring something of a tightening and a theological construction to the doctrine of inspiration. And so I argue how Warfield continues in that project from the year of 1880 on to 1915, the theological contributions that he made, how they compare to some of the liberal theologians of his day, how they compare to even some of his allies during his day, W.G.T. Shedd being one of them. I hope that you'll take up the book, whether you have an interest in the human story of B.B. Warfield and the theological construction that he undergoes, or whether you have an interest in the theological controversies of inspiration of our own particular day and how Warfield speaks into them. I hope you'll pick up this book and read it and enjoy it, and most of all, I hope that God is glorified in the process.